Welcome back to Trib Sports After Dark and The Final Whistle podcast. And we're here to talk some high school football. Starting off with our football scores, we have Lake City beating Lewiston 6-0 in a defensive battle there. East Valley over Clarkston 29-27. Heartbreaker there for Clarkston at home. Moscow on senior night over Timberlake 27-13. North Central over Pullman in overtime 36-35. Colfax over Kettle Falls 38-8. Clearwater Valley over Lapway 50-14. That was a Thursday game. Peoria over Lewis County 48-28. Garfield Palouse over St. John Endicott 52-18. Genesee over Timberline 54-32. Kamei over Potlatch 60-20. Kendrick over Logos 48-24. Pomeroy over Waitsburg 80-46. Prairie over Troy 76-28. And let's just start with the senior night game from tonight. That was Moscow ending its season with a big win over Timberlake. Sam, you were at that game. Tell us a little bit about it.
The Bears got the 27-13 win over their league foe Timberlake. The Bears were pretty much able to run the ball on demand. Mason Marzolf, their sophomore running back, it was his first time really in this role as kind of their bell cow primary running back, and he excelled with 125 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. And then Wyatt Cross, their freshman quarterback, he started really strong, 2 passing touchdowns, but he ended up throwing 3 interceptions as well. But as their coach, as Moscow coach Rob Bafus said, you're not going to find really any other freshman quarterback in the state of Idaho putting up the numbers that he did this year. And so, definitely an emotional senior night. Paul Dixon, one of the seniors in the starting offensive line, one of the starting offensive linemen, he talked about, how the Bears were really, you think about his freshman year, sophomore year, they went a combined 1-15 over that span. And then last year win 7 games, go to the playoffs. This year win 6 games and, a chance at the playoffs. And it's a pretty inspiring story for the Bears and for this program and for those seniors who are kind of that fundamental group, foundational group that built them all up.
Speaking of just the game in general, it seems like a hard-fought game. Can you talk more about Mason Marzolf, the running back? Why did he have success? Was the offensive line dominating? Why were they able to run the ball so well?
Yeah, offensive line was dominating. They were opening up a lot of great holes, but also it was to Mason's credit as well. There was a lot of yards after contact. So Timberlake, the Tigers would swarm him, and he'd be able to pick up a few more yards here or there. There was one moment where they thought they had him at after a 3 or 4 yard gain, and then he burst out for 10 more yards after that. And so he's a really hard runner, and he's versatile too. Coach Bafus said that they've asked him to be an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, a tailback, and a linebacker, and he even plays piano on the side in his free time. And so he's a man of many talents and a versatile skill set. And when he got the chance to shine with the ball in his hand, he did just that.
You said in your story, kind of highlighting the seniors who have been there for 4 years and through some very tough seasons. The first couple of years for those guys and for when Rob Bafus was starting out were pretty rough, but to stick through it and now end with back-to-back winning seasons for those seniors, a great turnaround for the team. You mentioned Paul Dixon, Jericho Pike in your story. And so Moscow does end, if they do not make the state playoffs, they will end 6-3, 1-1. So great season for Moscow. I guess there's still a chance that they can make the playoffs, but it's kind of a slim one, right?
Yeah, they're depending on Timberlake taking down Bonners Ferry, and Bonners Ferry, of course, they blew out Moscow earlier this season. And so, but next Friday, Timberlake hosts Bonners Ferry. If Timberlake wins, that means the whole league is tied at 1-1 apiece, and they do what Bafus called a Kansas City tiebreaker, where they go to a neutral site, and they basically, he wasn't sure of the exact rules. I'm not sure either. But
it's basically a three-team mini game that they play to decide the state
red
league
zone,
champion.
right?
I remember it being something like they each play 1/2 worth of duration, against each of the other teams.
Interesting.
Little round robin. I've heard of it. It's come up at some point in my career before.
So, we'll have to look at the exact rules if it does come to that. But for that to happen, Timberlake will have to beat Bonners Ferry for Moscow to even have a chance to extend its season. But either way, great season for Moscow, especially when you consider how rough it was for those guys a couple years ago.
And I'll say again, as a lifelong Moscow resident, winning seasons for the Bears have been hard to come by for most of the last, couple decades or so.
Yeah.
I remember. 2 in a row, 2 comfortably winning seasons in a row, certainly something for them to be proud of. Speaking of Moscow programs, we might.
Exactly. And yeah, we'll just kind of keep going with some of our Big Four schools here. So Lewiston, a tough loss for them against Lake City, 6-0. Scoreless game, that one, until the fourth quarter when Lake City finally got on the scoreboard with a short passing touchdown. So tough loss on the road for Lewiston, but the nice thing for the Bengals is it really doesn't matter in the large scheme of things. Former league foes going at it, but now Lewiston is still 5A, whereas Lake City 6A. So Lewiston still actually has a chance to win their league. As let's see, Lewiston 3-5 right now,
But 1-0 in league.
1-0 in league in their three-team league. They have a chance to clinch that if they would beat Lakeland next week also on the road. And so they're probably already kind of just looking ahead to that one. That's the important game for Lewiston to win there, would clinch the state playoffs for the Bengals. Cody, we'll talk to you for maybe these next two games. Starting with Pullman, they lose an overtime game against North Central. Pullman has had a lot of very close games this season, and another one that doesn't go their way this time for the Hounds.
Yeah, I think actually, I was listening to this one on my way up to the office on radio 104.7, and the commentators were saying, some of these guys for Pullman have come along. Like Nick Neville had back-to-back rushing touchdowns of about 58 yards apiece. That's what they were saying on the radio anyway. And he was saying earlier in the season when I was watching these games, the commentator was saying this, and Neville I would think, gosh, he just needed to elude one or two more guys and he'd have that touchdown. And now he's doing it. And they were pretty excited actually, these Greyhound commentators, and the Hounds had a turnaround after dropping their first 4 or 5 games of the season. They'd won a couple and they were, had some momentum. So, in fact, they lost their first 4 and then won their last 2. And they were on the brink of making that 3 in a row. So, this is, a terrible, just as the Hounds might have thought they were, emerging as leaders of the pack. They're too young to be booze hounds, but I'm sure they're drowning their sorrows in some figurative way now.
Well, how about sticking on the Washington side with Clarkston, very close to getting their first win of the season. In fact, they've had I believe a couple close games now that they're finally playing at home very late in the season. Their first month or so was all on the road, but a tough loss to East Valley, Cody.
Mm-hmm. Yes, in fact, so Clarkston, and by the way, this is interesting. Of our 4, the Big 4 area schools, Moscow, Pullman, Lewiston, and Clarkston, 3 of them suffering heartbreaking defeats by, single possession or less. You can tell the Tribune, very shrewd, very, very wise decision-making by Stephen Weeby, sending our man to the one successful effort for the Big 4 area schools. This one, Clarkston actually built an early lead, 27-13 going into intermission. This very promising signs for the Bantams to finally collect their first win of the season. As Steph was saying, they've come close to winning before. This was not the first, wrenching defeat, and I wonder if the mental scar tissue, of going 0-6, of narrowly dropping previous opportunities, may have contributed to what happened here. With East Valley striking back in the fourth quarter with 16 points to overtake the Bantams, when they were apparently on the verge of victory. Interestingly, a field goal deciding this one. Again, I feel like field goals have been a great rarity in my career at the high school level from everything I've covered. It seems like there's been a significant upsurge. Pullman had a critical field goal to win its game of last week, 1916 against Rogers. Now East Valley pulling the same trick in the same league to, get a game out of the fire on a field goal. So.
Pullman's kicker, by the way, was 5 for 5 on extra points.
Yes,
as
the
well.
very same fellow who made that winning field goal last week, Al Suwahi. Hopefully, we're saying his name correctly.
Speaking of hopefully saying players' names right, Nico Ahai with 25 rushes for 280 yards and a TD
Most
for
of their
Clarkston.
yardage,
So almost 300 yards for him. A great player for the Bantams. Just a bit of a tough season for those guys. Let's move over to one of our basically games of the year, especially in the White Pine League. That would be Kendrick beating Logos. Logos beat Kendrick last year in this game and ended up winning the league title. Of course, Kendrick went on to win the state title. Kendrick won this one pretty big, but it was close for a lot of the game. Isn't that right, Cody?
Yes, indeed. So Actually, we were sitting in suspense in the office for quite some time about this one, as there was no NFHS stream. Normally, that National Federation of High Schools is good about streaming games. There's nothing for us to follow live, and it got quite late, and we still hadn't heard from any coaches. We were speculating, could there have been an upset? But it is true. No one really thought that. We've been going on every week about how unstoppably dominant the Tigers are. I think I said, maybe Logos would get. I feel like in some ways my prognostications were accurate. I said maybe Logos would get a little more than Kamiai that got 2 touchdowns on Kendrick rather. Kamiai got 2 touchdowns on Kendrick, but I certainly did not envision there being a game this entire season, regular season or postseason, in which Kendrick would not have already built an unassailable lead by halftime, let alone a game in which Kendrick would actually be trailing at halftime. And that's what happened today. The Knights were ahead 16-14 at intermission. It was 2 touchdowns apiece, and Logos got a safety. And that's been another running theme of this season. There's been a startling surge in safeties in high school football. I feel like I barely recorded 1 safety in the last 8 years. And then, there's at least a couple safeties every week now. But yes, Logos leading on that safety, and Kendrick nosing ahead 20-16 through the third quarter, and then the floodgates opened. A switch flipped was the wording of the Tigers' young coach and former quarterback Ty Kep. The fourth quarter, Kendrick scores 28 points, makes it a 48-24 runaway in the end. So it was a great game, by the way, for Orion Stewart. And he's one of the Kendrick, he's been there all along, but he's not one of the guys we've been giving shout-outs to, relentlessly. So this was kind of his time to shine. He ran, what was it? We have the exact stats in here somewhere. He rushed 9 times for 190 yards and 3 touchdowns. In fact, he scored 2 of those critical fourth quarter touchdowns and their third quarter touchdowns. So he spearheaded the Tiger surge to victory. Kendrick thus has sort of reasserted its dominance over Logos. Well, they didn't have a rivalry until last year when Kendrick moved into the league. But Kendrick, anyway, clearly has in spite of being tested, maintains its supremacy. Logos, nonetheless, very impressive. I think in spite of its 22-20 loss to Kamiai, Logos is probably the second most impressive team in Idaho Class 2A right now.
I think that one thing that we have to keep in mind is that Logos, as you said, they had the lead at half. So, this is kind of telling for what could happen come state playoffs or come any district playoffs, where Logos could compete with Kendrick. They really stayed in it until really the fourth quarter. So that could be something to keep an eye on for the future, the next few weeks with Logos and Kendrick.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 ways you could look at it. On one hand, Logos kept it close through 3 quarters. We're leading at halftime. And then on the other hand, Kendrick still ended up doubling them up by the end, a team that might be the second best team in the state. And so Kendrick clearly the clear favorites for another state title. Of course, a long ways to go still for that. But a big win for them. And then Logos still can take some positives away from that game for sure.
I think it's pretty likely that we'll be seeing the Tigers and the Knights meet each other again in the postseason, depending on how the brackets shake up. That could be in the championship, it could be in the semis.
We might wind up. You were even involved in the media polling, Sam. I don't know what if there's going to be any shift here. Again, I feel like their Knights' performance against common opponents has been better than Kamiai Cubs since that 22-20 win for Kamiai over Logos. And I don't know if Logos remind me, how does the state rankings are not based on the media polls?
No,
they're based on max preps.
Preps. Yeah.
So I'm curious whether Logos might wind up getting the second seed for state. Maybe it'll be I feel like Logos and Kamiai will be the second and third seeds for state in one order or the other, and they're likely to have a rematch in the state semis.
Likely, yeah.
Which could go either way, and then the winner could get that second crack at the Tigers. That is my prediction. In fact, I say that will happen. Mark my words.
It's the Cody guarantee.
Yes.
Amazing.
Well, aside from Kendrick, we still have 3 other area teams who are undefeated. That would be Pomeroy, Genesee, and Colfax. And of course, we have to talk a little bit about these teams. Still rolling undefeated. Pomeroy 7-0, Genesee 7-0, and then Colfax, I believe 6-0.
6-0.
This and yeah, let's just start with Pomeroy. They beat Waitsburg 80-46. Yeah, Trevor, you want to tell us a little bit about that game?
Yeah, Pomeroy stays unbeaten at 7-0 and 4-0 in league. The real thing that stands out from this game is Kaiser Harris, who had 42 rushes for 316 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's a Derrick Henry High School stat line. That's something
really
that's pretty
is.
insane. And then Vinny Vecchio threw for 7 for 10 for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also rushed 11 times for 50 yards. Pomeroy just looks like an unbeaten team. They look like somebody who really will compete for the rest of the season and stick around in the Southeast 1B League. So a team to watch out for. Did you notice anything there for Pomeroy, guys?
I mean, I think the one thing that stands out is having Vinny Vecchio back at quarterback. I mean, he missed the last game with an injury, and so just the fact that he's back, even though they showed that they could win with some other guys last week, you know, you want all your best players if you're going to make a run, and he's back in the lineup, so that's great to see. Colfax, they were 38-8 over Kettle Falls, another team. You know, Colfax, not a team that is putting up these like 80 points or 100 points like the Pomeroys or the Kendricks, but they're still undefeated, and they keep going. Isaac Nelson had 2 rushing touchdowns. Tyler Ho had 2 interceptions. What are your guys' thoughts on Colfax?
It's actually pronounced Tyler Hugh. I know it's spelled like it might be Ho, but that's
Tyler
what,
Hugh. Let's say
their
his
coach
name
David
right.
Colfer told me it was Hugh.
Tyler Hugh with 2 interceptions. Yeah.
Yeah. Colfer also noted his Bulldogs, who, by the way, defeated another team of Bulldogs in a league of 3 teams, 2 of which are Bulldogs. Happened to, he says that his team has basically secured the league title. That's exciting for them with just one more game left in their regular season. And by the way, we're talking about how many Bulldogs there are.
There's one more. Who would that be, Cody?
The Genesee Bulldogs.
Our last undefeated team.
Yes, indeed. So, in fact, what of our 4 undefeated teams in the Tribune area, 2 are Bulldogs. I noticed this recurring theme. I want to put out the plea, some Bulldog franchises might consider revisions. You might consider, and it can even be difficult to write an item when Bulldogs face Bulldogs, consider from the sports writer's perspective. Anyway, in the league they're in now and the state they're in now, the Bulldogs have been excelling. They have not been one of the super dominant undefeated teams that hasn't had to work for it, let's say. I mean, Kendrick, again, today's game was the closest thing to a scare they've had. Pomeroy's been very dominant all season. Genesee, I remember a week ago actually made a miraculous comeback from being over 20 points down in the second quarter to secure the win against was it Wallace, another undefeated team.
How about some players of the week? Maybe starting with you, Trevor.
Yeah, Kaiser Harris. I can't say this enough. Again, 42 rushes for 316 yards and 6 touchdowns.
How about you, Cody?
Orion Stewart of Kendrick. Again, a guy who, among all the weighty names of the Tiger faithful, has not always been in the spotlight. But again, this was his game. Stewart with 190 yards rushing, making 3 critical touchdowns for the Tigers in the second half. After they had trailed heading into intermission against the Logos Knights.
And Sam, finally getting back to you. You haven't said much in a while, but how about going back to the Bears, that game we started with today?
Yeah, I'd say Mason Marzolf he's gonna be my player of the week of the Moscow Bears. Sophomore getting his really first key role. He of course racked up 125 rushing yards.
And with guys like him and Wyatt Cross going to be around for several years, future is definitely looking bright if this does end up being the last game of the season for Moscow.
Absolutely.
I'll give a shout out as well. Mostly we pretty much always give players of the week to winning teams, but just going to go back to Nico from Clarkston. Again, 25 rushes, 280 yards, and 1 touchdown. And this will also be this is basically our last week with a full week of football games.
Wow.
So if we're coming back next week, some of these teams will no longer be playing. And so we'll see what happens as we're getting closer to playoffs for high school football. And with that is going to wrap up our Week 8 for Tribune Sports After Dark. Stick around for some college football talk with Sam and Trevor on the Final Whistle podcast. and join us next week.
Hello, and welcome to the college football edition of the Final Whistle, a Lewiston Tribune sports podcast. And with me is Trevor John, our Idaho writer. How's it going, Trevor?
Good, Sam. How are you?
Pretty good. And you had a quick jaunt up to Cheney, Washington for the Idaho Eastern Washington game. Tell us about that. How did that go for the Vandals?
Yeah, it was a pretty rough game for the Vandals. But one thing that did change compared to last week, so they lost to Eastern Washington 21-14. But a week ago, they lost to Northern Colorado 49-33, where the offense really did kind of perform and the defense didn't perform at all. In this game, the defense performed very well, and the offense didn't do anything at all. Wow. They cycled through quarterbacks. It was Jack Wagner, Rocco Koch going at each other. Going at Eastern Washington. And then Jack Wagner actually went out with injury. Not sure what the injury was, but then it was Rocco Koch, who is he's a gadget guy. He runs the ball a lot. He passed the ball, was 0 for 6, and then they replaced him with Nick Joseph, who technically is their number 5 quarterback on the roster. So he got in the game. He scored a touchdown, made it a little bit closer, but Idaho ended up losing 21-14 in there. But what I wanted to talk about is our columns this week, what we wrote about in the columns. One thing that I mentioned in my column is I think that we need to give Ford and the Idaho program time to just build on what they have. Give them grace is basically what I said. They're a first-year head coach, a first-year program, first-year coordinators, guys with Court Dennison and Matt Lanahan, and mainly first-year starters. These guys really didn't start. I think they have like 3 returning starters on the team, and they're very young. And I just said, give them time to build their program. That's all that Idaho really needs right now.
Yeah, I know. And as you wrote in your column, obviously Thomas Ford was super eager in his introductory news conference in December. He full on just say, this is not a rebuild. It's a continuation of the Eck era, which delivered Idaho, 3 consecutive FCS playoff appearances, of which Ford was a staff member for the first 2. So he saw the blueprint of what was possible at Idaho. And, I think he's by and large on the right track. You could say, you play the what-if game all day. If Joshua Wood, plays in these games, maybe they have 2 more wins, and then it's a different conversation. They're just right in the thick of the playoff hunt. Now they're in a situation where, if they win out, it's 7-5, and that barely gets you in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So and the chances of them winning out with some of the opponents on their schedule are pretty slim.
UC Davis, Northern Arizona, those are pretty tough guys on the schedule.
Yeah, spooky game of Northern Arizona on Halloween coming up soon. What's next for Idaho? What do you think they can make of this season? What's a successful season by about a month from now?
I think probably winning. I don't know. You can lose 1 or 2 more games. I think going 6-6, going even 5-7 is not so bad. Especially with again no Joshua Wood for 3 games so far, 2 games so far, and 1 half game. So yeah, I don't know. I expect Ford to build a program, get more recruits, get more transfers, and build on for the next couple of years. I think this year is kind of a throwaway. It is a first-year head coach, and he's establishing a culture at a program. But I don't think necessarily making the playoffs is the standard right now. I think it's just we're building this program up for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
So tell me about WSU. They played Virginia, number 18 Virginia. How'd that go?
We saw Wazoo control the game for 50 minutes, have a 10-point lead at the beginning of the 4th quarter, and then lose it all and lose on a go-ahead safety in tragic fashion. There were several ways that several mistakes, several key points, turning points for this game. Virginia started the 4th quarter with a 97-yard, 9-play drive to score a touchdown and cut Wazoo's lead to 3. And that was a case of just Wazoo being a little bit gassed. And then you saw Wazoo commit 4 consecutive penalties, 3 false starts and a holding call, and then Zeviakos throwing an interception. The defense stands tall, and then it's still just a tied game after that. And then the weirdest fair catch that you'll ever see happens where Kirby Voorhees gestures, to call in a fair catch. That's counted as calling a fair catch, and Smithson catches it, tries to return it, but it's a dead ball, fair catch at the 2-yard line. So Wazoo's pinned at the 1. They can't make anything happen. They hand it to Kirby Voorhees on 3rd down. He gets tackled in the end zone safety. They are just out of time. And so Rogers went in detail about, all the things, all the decisions that he regretted and all the ways that he and, his staff kind of cost themselves this game. And it was kind of refreshing dose of accountability, but still a crushing loss.
So tell me what this means for the Cougs' future before we close this out. What does this mean for the Cougs' future? How does this feel for Rogers? How does this feel for the team in general?
Well, immediate view is, this pretty much sucks. They were on the verge of a program-defining, season-defining win, getting their tentpole, statement victory over a ranked team on the road after a 5-hour flight. All those things. They were 17.5-point underdogs, and they had it, and then they just gave it away. And so you can say, oh man, that is awful, and it is awful. And you can also say, oh man, this team was competitive 2 weeks in a row against the number 4 team in the nation, then the number 18 team in the nation, and almost won on the road in those situations. And so when you look at the remainder of the schedule, Wazoo, bowl eligibility is still out there. They're 3-4. They have 5 games left, 2 of which against Oregon State, who've got a new, has an interim coach, Rob Akey, and finally, got their first win this past week. But you got 2 against Oregon State. You got Toledo this week. The immediate future can be bright for Wazoo. They can, potentially win out, get a decent bowl game, and then set themselves up very nicely for the new Pac-12 next year, where they won't have to do as many 5-hour flights.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sam, for talking about WSU. It was really fun to talk to you about these games. And again, that's Sam Taylor. I'm Trevor Junt. You're listening to The Final Whistle, and catch us next week talking about high school football and college football.